Electricast.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
Why wait to see if you'll get something you like this Valentine's Day when you can go to BlueNile.com and find something you'll love? Whether you're looking to treat yourself to a little winter sparkle or show a galentine how much you appreciate them, Blue Nile offers a wide selection of high-quality designs, expert guidance, and free 30-day returns for the ultimate peace of mind. You can even design your own jewelry. Right now, save up to 50% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
Since 2001, New England and its fans have celebrated 12 championships, and we have earned the nickname Titletown. But what about the year after? What happened after the duck boats pulled away from Government Center? What happened after the confetti was swept off of Tremont Street? Here, on this show, we look at every season after a championship where they failed to do so again. It's not going to be easy, but if it were, everyone would do it. This is the Championship Hangover. All right, everyone, welcome into the Championship Hangover. This is our first episode, and today we are talking about the 2002 New England Patriots. I am your host, Michael Marcangelo, joined alongside by Rayshawn Buchanan and Joe Malkin. And guys, this isn't something that people talk about often, so I'm really, really excited to do this.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. You're absolutely right. You know, we did that championship rewrap of the 2001 New England Patriots championship team in Super Bowl 36, which you can find anywhere you find your podcast. Just search the SNSW podcast. And that was so much fun to do. I mean, we did 2.5 hours on that. But no, you're absolutely right. Nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about the year after. And this is going to be a blast.
It's really easy to talk about the years that you didn't win because you can draw all the emotion that you felt like, oh man, like I didn't think we would do it, then we did, and you go crazy. But then, you know, how that euphoria comes down after, you know, you lose. So whether it be the year after, 2 years after, but you know, so it's great that we're bringing this up, and you know, hopefully the listeners love it as much as we do.
Yeah, and there's 12 teams in the NFL that haven't even had the chance to have a hangover. So I guess this is another privilege of being a New England Patriots fan.
Exactly. And I think, Joe, you set the table perfectly, right? Just a little bit of a backstory. We all know what happened in 2001, right? The Patriots completed the most unlikely season by defeating the greatest show on turf, 20-17, as time expired, all with an unproven second-year quarterback in Tom Brady and a desperate head coach in Bill Belichick. And again, we all know that night, everyone was Patriots and the Patriots were world champions. But then after that, we were back to, are the Patriots going to be contenders? No one was counting them in, right? That offseason, if you remember, was a pretty notable one. Drew Bledsoe, Mr. Patriot, and the franchise player who had pretty much revived the New England Patriots in their franchise, he was traded to Buffalo after signing a 10-year deal, along with Terry Glenn. So when you think about those two players, what they had meant to the Patriots, it's a little crazy to think that now they're just gone.
Yeah, and that was the biggest thing with Drew Bledsoe, right? So you mentioned what's going to happen the next year. Are they going to be able to sustain this? Was this a flash in the pan? Because everybody looked at Drew Bledsoe coming into 2001. He had just signed a huge contract, and he gets knocked out by Mo Lewis. Nobody knew what was going to happen. It's kind of it was a weird feeling if you think about it, kind of like a euphoric, fearful time as a fan, because you don't know what's going to happen. Drew Bledsoe leaves for the Buffalo Bills, which was a very strange trade for the Patriots at the time, right? You're trading him to a division rival, a longtime rival of the New England Patriots, and I guess it was a lot to dump the contract. But now you have, you mentioned that Brady was a second-year quarterback in 01. I mean, technically 02 was his second year. It was his first year where he would start game one, right? And it was his second year because his first season in the league, he didn't even dress. So, I mean, that without a doubt has to be the biggest loss, because now we said, well, okay. I think it was split. Half the fans said, all right, Brady's our guy. This is what's going to happen. This is what we're going forward with. Bill trusts this guy. But at the same time, it was like, whoa, like this was kind of the first shakeup and kind of a transcendent moment for the NFL, right? I mean, so was Joe Montana being shipped off to Kansas City at the end of his career. But Bledsoe, for all intents and purposes, was right in the middle of his career. And this was a big move.
I mean, I remember being nervous that, Drew went to Buffalo. But I was like, man, like, not only did he leave the Patriots, but like I said, he's within the division, like you just mentioned. And I actually thought Buffalo was going to win the division. I was like, Drew's going to come out here and just fling it all over the field. But even on a deeper level, it's like, okay, if Brady's to get hurt, now who's the guy that's going to be behind him? Who's going to be starting? So there was just a whole bunch of questions that went into that season. Like it was exciting to see something new, but at the same time, it's like, okay, as a fan, you still wanted that security blanket just in case something happened. So, but like either way, we found out real quick, that Brady had the reins.
Yeah, and again, Drew Bledsoe was Mr. Patriot. On a lighter note, Terry Glenn, who was probably the most versatile and electric wide receiver that we had known, our generation knows up to this point as a Patriot, he doesn't get a Super Bowl ring, and he packs it away and goes to Green Bay to join Brett Favre and the Packers. So again, you lose Mr. Patriot, you lose probably the most versatile offensive weapon that you have. Now Bill Belichick is forced to look to the draft, and I don't know, Joe, if you remember this draft class. But not only did he look, he found people that would go on, in the future to contribute very, very highly to the Patriots. But he drafts number 1, 21st overall pick, Daniel Graham. Second round, Deion Branch. Later in the draft, he took Jarvis Green, who was, as Rayshawn can mention, he was very, very good on the defensive line. And then Mr. Irrelevant for the Patriots that year was David Givens. So you lose a great receiver. And they got 2. Do you think, so take yourself back to your 12-year-old self, 2002, right? Bledsoe's gone. Terry Glenn's gone. When you see like Deion Branch and David Givens, are you excited at all?
Well, it was kind of cool to think about that, to take myself back to the 2002 and think about how I was back then. I mean, I've always thought I was a very consistent sports fan, even back then, because I didn't really have I mean, I grew up, at that point being 12, 13 years old, grew up watching Drew Bledsoe, but, having him leave and then seeing Bill surround this young kid who just won you a Super Bowl with some talent. I mean, this could go, this might be the hot take of the entire show, but this might have been one of his best offensive drafts he ever had. I mean, Daniel Graham, Deion Branch, and David Givens, as you said, Mike, all guys that contributed on the offensive side of the ball. And then you had Jarvis Green, who very much contributed on the defensive side and added to a defense that was already very good. And for what it's worth, was still Pete Carroll's defense in a lot of ways. So, I don't know if excitement, because I've never been one to get excited over a draft, because in my lifetime, the Patriots have never drafted the guy, right? Like we've never seen that. And we haven't seen that in the last 20 years. That's for sure. They've never drafted the guy. I mean, even Tom Brady, you're like, 199th overall in the 6th round, compensatory pick. So I mean, excitement in the sense that he was trying to surround himself. And Terry Glenn was one of those guys, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more as well. We may not talk about it more as we go, but Terry Glenn was one of those guys that he was very outspoken. I think he and Bill, I think there was a lot of friction there. He was a Parcells guy, and he got along really well with Bill Parcells, and which means he was here during Belichick's first stint as a defensive coach with the New England Patriots in the mid '90s, that '95 team. But I don't think they got along very well, and I think that's part of the reason why he was shipped off to Green Bay. And I think that was a good move for him at the time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, hell no. I wasn't excited about Deion Branch and David Gibbons coming.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean, Ray. Right? Like, how can you be excited about these guys coming out of the draft? Like, you don't know what you're getting, and you have a second-year quarterback effectively.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, to me, even at 12 years old, like, I definitely was a Troy Brown guy because of what happened the year before. With him making that touchdown and AFC Championship game. So yeah, I wasn't excited about no rookies coming. I had no idea where they came from. Like I didn't know that Branch came from Louisville, and I don't even remember what school Gibbons came from. But like you said, he was Mr. Oh no, Notre Dame. It was Notre Dame, I think. But yeah, he was. It was Mr. Irrelevant. So at 12 years old, 22 years old, 42 years old, like you're not expecting that guy to be, anything to a team that's contending. So, but like you said, I mean, Daniel Graham didn't pan out as well as he could have been or should have been. And that's putting it lightly, just in case if we get you as a guest, we want to be nice. But I mean, Branch, ended up having a decent rookie season. I think he had 43 catches, 489 yards, 2 touchdowns. So you kind of saw a glimpse of what he was going to be as he built that chemistry with Brady. Green was here for about 7 to 8 years. Like I said, wasn't someone that was going to get you 10 sacks a year, but he was someone that gets you 3 or 4 a year, and play that 4-3 defense that Bill liked to run, especially at that time with having a big front seven. So yeah, I mean that draft really set up what we will see for years to come. And I agree with you, Joe. I do think this is probably the best draft that he's had, really on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, offensively for sure. And so now we're past the draft. We're going into the end of the preseason. The Patriots are not even favored to not even win the Super Bowl, but to even make it. Pittsburgh is still the team to beat in the AFC at this point in time. Little do they know that Oakland was also still pretty good too. But now Gillette Stadium, the first game in Gillette Stadium, it is the grand opening. The banner is raised. There's celebrations going around. It's prime time. It's the Patriots versus the Steelers. And again, the Patriots, I'm pretty sure I did my research. They were a half-point favorite. So at home, they were pretty much an underdog, right? That's what that means. And they blew them out 30-14. That game, I think, showed us exactly what we loved about Bill Belichick and Tom Brady in terms of the offense. And it was a great defensive performance as well. So when, again, thinking back, first game after the Super Bowl, it's regular season, the banner's up, and they blow out the Steelers. What are you guys thinking?
I remember it pretty well. I mean, it was – you're kind of coming off of a high, right? And that's the point. That's the point of this whole show right here is the hangover. You're coming off a high. Your team is not even in the top 2 to repeat as AFC champions. Not to mention even get there, because you're right, Mike. The favorites were the Steelers, and I'm pretty sure the Raiders were right there behind them. I mean, because they didn't know what to say about New England. I mean, you look at, and there's a reason for that. I mean, you look at the offseason and the trading of Drew Bledsoe, who was on $100 million contract, the trading of Terry Glenn, who it needs to be mentioned too, that Terry Glenn only played in 4 games in 2001. So it's not like he was a big contributor to that Super Bowl win. I for a moment, I actually forgot he was even on that team because he only played in 4 games. He only started in 1. So, I mean, but you look at that Pittsburgh game, they come out firing. I used to love that about the NFL too. So here's my NFL schedule rant. I don't know why they got away from this, but to open the season up with the Super Bowl champs against the team that they played in their conference championship game, I feel like that's the way it should be every year. I really do. I mean, it just adds so much to that first game, especially if you're going to put it on a Thursday night in prime time, when we know that Thursday night games really have not gotten the big games or great games. Granted, go go back to 2002. This game was on a Monday night, so I mean, you could do that too. Cap off the week. But anyway, rant over about NFL scheduling, because we all know that that's a cluster anyway. So they come out and they beat up on the Steelers, and that, you're right, Mike. I mean, that was kind of a message sent right away, right? So, I mean, we all kind of know what happened in this season, and we'll get there as we progress. But I mean, just what a game against the Steelers. The Steelers aren't expecting it. You got Bill Cowher. I mean, I was going to mention that about the coaches and why the Patriots weren't favored. I mean, you kidding me? You got Bill Cowher as the head coach of the Steelers. You have John Gruden, the head coach of the Raiders. I mean, Cordell Stewart was the quarterback of the Steelers, and that was his heyday. I mean, he was pretty good. I actually think he was underrated for the quarterback that he was. But I mean, man, that team, and I'm looking at it now, that Cordell Stewart, Antoine Randall L., Jerome Bettis, Hines Ward, Plaxico Burress. I mean, they and that's why they were favored to win the Super Bowl, because who did the Patriots have? J.R. Redmond, Tom Brady, David Gibbons, Antoine Smith. I mean, so it's not like we're talking about big name guys, and Bill Belichick, who had been a relative kind of a failed coach in Cleveland. And, was it a flash in the pan that they won the Super Bowl? Did they just feed off of what was going on in the country and then make it happen? I don't know. I mean, but at the time, I don't know. But this was a good way to start off a season coming off a Super Bowl.
Later on, we found out that we usually own Pittsburgh in these moments. Like Pittsburgh, we faced them quite a few times, I think, at the beginning of the year. But needless to say, yeah, it was a great way. Like I said, obviously, we closed down the dump that was Foxborough Stadium. Even though we had a last great moment there, but we know that stadium was not. Even though I never went there, but I'm glad I didn't go. Listen to the Spurs that
it was
Joe
so
had.
much fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it was fun to watching, but I'm like, just but I mean, Gillette is Gillette. And, so for them to come into the stadium, and I had to think about it. How crazy is that, Mike, that this team came in being a half-point favorite at home? Like, we have to go back to, like, we've 18 years later, it's like, oh, my God, like, they half-point favorite? Like, there's no way. But once again, like you said, Joe, like, if you have guys like Bill Cowher, that was a hell of a coach, and, how stacked that Pittsburgh team was, because people didn't believe in New England mystique yet, obviously. And I think Vegas thought it was a fluke too. They said, you know what? Yeah, they won. Okay. Let's see what they could do in year two.
Well, right. And to that point, you talk about them being half-point favorites at home. We've said it a few times now. That this is kind of where that underdog mentality of the New England Patriots picked up steam. They used it so much in 2001, like, hey, you know what? You just knocked out our dude. Like, Drew Bledsoe was a top quarterback in the NFL, and now this kid coming from Michigan is going to be our starting quarterback. We're going to see what we can do with him. The Raiders don't respect us. The Steelers don't respect us. The Rams don't respect us. And now the NFL and Vegas don't respect us. All right, here we go. Let's show you what we can do. And they've used that to this day. And they really used it during Brady's time here in New England. I don't think it works in 2020 as much with Cam Newton and kind of a changing of the guard with Tom Brady gone. I think it was nightmare fuel for other teams when it was Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and playing the underdog card. And people got tired of that for a long time. But this is where this Pittsburgh game and this 2002 season is where that mentality really picked up steam.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the 2002 season, right, they don't have that aura around them yet. It's still kind of unproven. Brady, yeah, they won a Super Bowl, sure, but like, were they just riding like a big wave of momentum, like you said, and to open up the season and really win with no doubt against Pittsburgh, followed up with a 44-7 victory over the New York Jets, and then the next week after that, you're 41-38 in overtime against the Kansas City Chiefs, you're 3-0. You're the defending, reigning NFL, Super Bowl champions, and you're 3-0. And still people out there are casting doubts. So after that 3-0 start, I remember this vividly. I was like, they're going to do this again. They're better. They figured it out. I don't know about the rest of you, but after 3-0, I kind of felt like, we're scoring at least 30 points a game, over 40 twice. This is a good offense. Maybe this is going to be another year.
So here's another interesting point about this season that we need to bring up. This was an expansion year. This was the year that the Houston Texans came into the league, and we talked about it before we came on. And this was when the divisions went from East, Central, West to East, North, South, and West. And that win over the Jets was big, but it wasn't enough, as we find out at the end of the season. Because I forgot how bad the AFC East was that year. But that win over the Chiefs, and I have to mention it more for Bobby, who's not here with us. But Priest Holmes ran for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game against the New England Patriots on 30 attempts. I mean, the Patriots were beating good teams. Pittsburgh, and not to jump ahead too much on you, Mike, but Pittsburgh went on to go 10-5-1 and win the North. The Jets were 9-7 and end up winning the East. And the Kansas City Chiefs, granted, they finished at the bottom of the AFC West, but they were 8-8 because that division was, not bad. So yeah, it was kind of a fun first 3 games to really look at and say, hey, all right, now we've picked up momentum, and we can really do something here.
Yeah, I definitely thought they had caught fire too, because like I said, I was nervous coming into the season, but obviously, even as a kid, as a fan, you start to relax a little bit when you see your team get out to that start. We soon found out that it wasn't going to stay consistent, but to start off 3-0. Coming off that championship run, really just let me know, okay, maybe they are here to stay. Maybe they are, maybe they have found their franchise quarterback, and maybe they are the team of the future. So, but there was a lot of ups and downs though. But that start was great, nevertheless.
This is I think this is the most bipolar Patriots team that we can ever talk about, right? Because they start 3-0, and it looks like everything is firing on all cylinders, and then they go on to do something that they had never done under Bill Belichick and have never done since, and lose 4 straight games, but 5 out of their next 7.
You couldn't even say it. Look at you, it sounds crazy. It's like, what?
Let me say that again. They lost 4 games in a row, and it wasn't like they were close. They were close nitty-gritty games. They put up 14 points against the Chargers, 13 points against the Dolphins. That's going to bite you in the butt. They put up 10 points against Terry Glenn's Green Bay Packers. Then they have a bye week, and they come out of the bye week and they lose to Denver. Can you think about it now? We're 18 years removed from this now, but just think about this. A 4-game losing streak for the Patriots with Tom Brady under Bill Belichick. So now you're sitting at 3-4.
No way. And I just want to point out that after that Week 8 loss to the Denver Broncos, it was the only time that season that they were under 500, if that's any consolation. But so the year prior, and the one game I key in on here is Sunday, October 6, 2002, against the Miami Dolphins, which they were doubled up and lost 26-13. This was the second time that Tom Brady had lost in Miami. He was beaten 30-10 the year before, in the year that they won the Super Bowl. This was when his woes in Miami began, right? He has never, for some reason, he was never really able to win in Miami. It was the only place he couldn't walk in and make something happen. And of course, then he goes to play for Tampa. So, but it's really interesting to look back at this season and see what they did and how they did it. You're absolutely right, Mike. That game is going to bite him in the butt. That Green Bay Packers team was they were pretty good too. That was a good team. Everybody always says, oh, the Patriots have had easy schedules. You look back at 2002 and look at their schedule. Boy, oh boy. That the whole schedule up and down was just tough, with maybe the exception of Detroit at the time. But Yeah, I mean, no. To answer your question, no. I didn't think you would never have seen that I don't think they ever, after the 2002 season, was there ever a point that they lost 4 games in a row with Tom Brady as quarterback?
This is the only time ever under Bill Belichick, regardless of who's quarterback, that he's ever lost 4 games in a row as the coach of the Patriots. So Ray, you said like you're riding high, like you're taking a deep breath right after 3-0. Now you're 3-4.
Now I'm freaking out. I'm freaking out. I'm going crazy. I'm pissed off as a kid. I'm like, I'm starting to focus on the Celtics, like even as a 12-year-older. So go figure. But man, like I'm like, yo, like you're the champs, bro. Like you're supposed to walk into certain places and say, you know what, we've won, we've been here. Let's impose our will, and that wasn't happening. And like Joe said, like that's where the beginning of the Miami Bulls happened. Right. So we talked a little bit about this off the air, but Miami and Denver were always two places that Brady just struggled. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I lived in Miami, so I mean, I can imagine how the week was coming into that. Maybe they went out to South Beach, especially because that's a young Brady too. So maybe they went out to South Beach. Maybe they went to get some wings like Lil Williams. Who knows? But I can understand why he had trouble in Miami. That's all I can say, and I'll leave it at that without us getting kicked off. But yeah, I was. But yeah, no, I was definitely freaking out going. I was like, maybe we're not as good as we thought we were. Shout out to Dennis Green. And yeah, so now I'm in a freak out stage.
So maybe here too, this is, you win those first 3 games, you're riding high. And then Mike, I think kind of what you're getting at here with this 4-game losing streak is, the hangover's hit. Like it's that point where you're coming down, and whether you've been out at South Beach having a few drinks before you play the Dolphins or whatever you've been doing. Now you're coming down from that, and things aren't going as well, and that headache's kicking in, and you don't really know what's going to happen. I attribute it to the fact that this was a very young team in 2002. I mean, sure, you had some of the best coaches in football with this team, right? I mean, this was the coaching staff that Bill Belichick put together in this first run of Super Bowls was just absolutely incredible. And most of them are still around. So that kind of says something to what it was in the early 2000s. But, I looking back on it in the moment, I'm with Ray. Like, yeah, man. Oh boy. All right. We're 3-4. There's 11 games left 9 games left in the season. What is this team going to do? How are they going to get out of this hole? They won last year as a 13-year-old kid. You're going, they got to go back. And then, as a parent, my dad was basically under the impression of, we won it once. That was great. Who knows? This could take forever. We may never do this again in my lifetime or your lifetime, is basically what he was saying at this point. So, a tough part of the year, and most teams have it, but I'm going to say it was because this team was young. I mean, we looked at that draft. We saw how many guys came in and contributed, and we'll talk about it in the next couple of rewraps, but we know that this team matures pretty well.
I feel like that's a generational thing because, like, my mom is a child of the 60s, and so she knows about the Celtics dominating. She knows about, she wasn't watching hockey, but, she knows about Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, Ray Bork, Cam Neely. So she knows about that era being, dominant as far as, they went to a couple of championships in the 70s themselves. But it was just like, look, okay, they got there. Great. She was like, I remember her saying, like, well, we know the Red Sox are never going to do X, Y, and Z. They ain't did nothing since, your grandmother was born. Yeah. So you were wrong, Mom. You were wrong. We said you were wrong.
Thank goodness she was wrong.
I think people. This is the part of the podcast where we should remind people that Boston sports fans were historically predispositioned to expect losing.
Yeah, let's talk about that right now too, because I mentioned it on the rewrap of, like, you have to go back to where this started and remember where you came from, because at some point this is all going to go downhill. It happens with every dynasty, right? The Cowboys fell off. The Steelers never really fall off. The Steelers are always consistent. That franchise has been consistent since day one, but even they went through a period where they didn't win anything, right? So eventually it's going to happen again. Looking at this Patriots team in 2020, if you're listening to this, eventually this team is going to be what they were in the late 80s and early 90s. They're not going to succeed. Hopefully that time comes later rather than sooner. But back in 2002, that was the mentality. As Mike and Rayshawn have just said, when they went to the Super Bowl after the 95 season, the Red Sox had a few really good years. In 2002, the Red Sox were starting to build something themselves. So you look back at it, and our friends and family that are a little bit older are saying, well, hang on a second, let's temper our expectations. And us as kids, we still weren't even, I'm thinking back on it now, we weren't even in the mindset yet of, okay, we're going to do this every year. That doesn't really happen until later. So at this point in the season, you're like, well, all right, well, that was fun while it lasted.
Yeah, Joe, we were in the mindset like, holy shit, it happened once. Oh my God. Like you mentioned, the Red Sox had some pretty good series. The Patriots had gotten there and lost, and then they finally did it. And it's like, okay, they did it. And then we're still Boston sports fans, right? Like they're still going to bring us right to the brink. And then I promise you, this is how we all used to feel. They will find a way in the most dramatic of fashion to break your heart. And I think, Ray, you're nodding your head like that's what you were expecting.
Oh, of course, man. And that's the thing. Like, I mean, well, it's not about the Red Sox, but, we brought it up. So it's like, 98, they make the playoffs. They lose to Cleveland, I believe. 99, we get to the ALCS. Pedro has that 17. They win 17-1 in New York. They lose again to New York. I mean, that New York team was ridiculous, but they lose there. They go away in 2000, go away in 2001. They go 93 and 69 in 2002. So like, oh, okay. But Grady Little, as we know, did nothing. So it's just like, yeah, like you said, it gets to the brink. You get there, you get closer, you get closer. And it's like, damn, fall off the cliff. And it's like, damn, it's like what the hell happened? But, thankfully that changed. But at that time, that was the thought process of like 95% of us.
Yep. So we just go through that 4-game losing streak, right? And who's waiting for us now? It is Drew Bledsoe and the Buffalo Bills. And I think what goes, pretty much unmentioned, like when you look back at history, this game in Buffalo was one of Tom Brady's absolute best. He went 22 of 26 for 265 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, quarterback rating of 147.6. And they handily defeated the Bills 38-7. So now you're like, okay, 4-4, you beat the guy. You beat Mr. Patriot. Bledsoe still threw for 300 yards, threw for a touchdown. Obviously, he threw a pick. That's what you do when you throw the ball 45 times. But now you kind of feel like maybe they even things out, or did they?
Maybe. I mean, they did even it out, right, at 4-4, and I think we all at that time didn't see Buffalo as much of a threat. I think they were kind of going through their decade-long hangover after losing 4 straight Super Bowls, but they were kind of rejuvenated. They finished the season 8-8. I think it was kind of an expected win. I just don't think we thought that after a bye week and a home loss to Denver, that they would go on the road and lose to Buffalo. I mean, New England's always, at that time had already created a pretty good rapport against the Bills. And I think Brady, Brady was young. This was the point where he was fired up. Bill was still his guy, right? It was kind of like big brother, little brother still. And I think he was going up there to show off, and he did. And he made his voice heard in Buffalo. At that point, I mean, I don't think it was necessarily hey, they're going to turn it around and this, they're going to go 12-4 now and they're going to run the table and go to the Super Bowl. I think it was more of a, all right, they're off the schneid. They're coming back. They beat Buffalo. Maybe the season isn't lost yet.
Yeah. So Ray, I mean, you said earlier in the show that you thought that the Bills that they could win the division, right? So now now the Patriots are going into Buffalo against Bledsoe at 3-4. What's going through your mind during that game?
Oh, we back in the game, baby. We back because I thought Bledsoe and Eric Moulds was going to tear up not only that division, I thought they were going to tear up the league. Eric Moulds was a pretty good receiver, Pro Bowler, if I'm not mistaken, at that time. So I was like, man, they're gonna tear it up. So we come into their house up in Orchard Park, and we ripped them apart. So I was like, oh, okay, like I thought this team was going to be better than this. We come in there, we're the champs. We're the guys that you went a little WWE earlier. They're reigning, defending. So I just thought that we were back on track. But I will say it's the game after that in Chicago in Illinois, at the University of Illinois. That's the game where I said, oh, now I think we're really going to get back to where it was, because now we're getting close to where we were the year before, where, we lost against St. Louis, but you felt like, okay, it was like a moral victory. But when Chicago scored 21 in the third quarter, and then we held them to only 3 in the fourth quarter, and we come back to win 33-30, I was like, oh, here we go. We're about to run the table. Jim Miller wasn't some guy that was going to beat us. I didn't care about Mike Brown, even though he was a good safety, or Urlacher, or R.W. McCordis, whoever was on that team. It didn't matter. Marty Booker, whoever was on that team. I was like, here we go. Brady's that guy. Number 2 is coming. But it didn't happen right then and there.
That Chicago team was pretty good at the time, and the reason why I wasn't high on the Bills was because they were the Bills still at the time, and I just looked at Drew Bledsoe's numbers from that year. He played pretty well. He was a Pro Bowl selection that year, 24 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, but was he fully healthy? And I think it was just a high that Tom and Bill had. And I know that Ray and I kind of look at that Buffalo game differently, but we don't look at the Chicago game differently. Because I absolutely agree. I forgot that was when they were doing the renovations to Soldier Field, and they were playing at the University of Illinois, which was absolutely hilarious. But when we went in there, they were having a rough time. I mean, they had won their first 2 games of the season. They had lost 5 in a row coming into that game against the Patriots, and it looked like at that point that's when they were going to try and turn it around. Right? It looked like Chicago was going to be able to do something, but at the end of the day, that team was not very good. I mean, they finished 4-12 that year. So, but like Rayshawn said, for them to come back, win that game 33-30, for Brady to have the game that he did, and really, I think this was the game where Brady showed that he was the guy, that he was a leader, and he was going to be able to do what needed to be done in order to win games.
So then they do that, right? They get back to their 5-4. They're above 500, and now it's a rematch of the AFC divisional matchup from the year before. It's except this time we're going to Oakland, and 27-20. I mean, so now I'm thinking I'm going to tell you right now. I'm thinking we're 5-5. We lost 4 games in a row. We should not. I mean, we were great to start. Awful in the middle. That defense was allowing, on average, 140 yards rushing per game. That defense, the same defense that held the greatest show on turf to 17 points. So I'm thinking, man, like I don't know what to do. Like, but a win against the Raiders would be great. And then they lose, and now you're back to 5-5. They just never. I think for me, looking back on it, it's easier to say now, but I think at 5-5, I was like, they might just be okay. Maybe they're not great. I don't know how you guys felt.
Yeah, this was the point. It's so funny how you think back on your 13-year-old mind and go, wow, we started 3-0. It's going to happen again, right, Ray? Like, that's what we said earlier. It's like, yes, this is going to happen. And then they lose 4 in a row. And it's kind of like that Red Sox revisionist history where we're like, oh, these guys suck. All right, never mind. Like, a flash in the pan. It's over. Like, this is it. And then they beat Buffalo. And it's like, okay, Tom beat his big brother. Like, we're getting there. And then they beat Chicago, who, they had to come back against. Again, I always hate to say, even an 0-16 Lions team, it's like, well, they're still an NFL team with NFL players. So you still have to give them some ounce of respect. And with this Bears team, you had to do the same thing. I mean, they were fighting for their lives this season too. And the Patriots just dug it out at the end. And then, Mike, as you're mentioning this Raiders game, I'm thinking, man, we beat them in the snow. We're going to get to go back out there and we're going to get to do it to them again. We're going to beat them. beat them into the ground. Like, that was so much fun last year. Their defense was bad. It kind of imploded after, even though they were still really good. After that loss to Oakland at 5-5, you're right, Mike. That was the point where I was like, all right, they still have a chance to limp out of the division into the playoffs, but it's probably not going to be another Super Bowl winning year, especially with a lot. Now they had lost to Green Bay, they had lost to Denver, lost to Oakland. So,
well, I actually thought that was going to be the last game they lost that year until they went into the playoffs, because I feel like, oh, this is the same thing as last year. They were 5-5. They'll catch
you were
fire.
almost right.
Yeah, well, almost right. They're going to catch fire. And, I thought because of what happened the year before, even as a kid, I kind of felt like, okay, we won at home, but to go out to Oakland, Woodson, Gannon, Jerry Porter, Jerry Rice, Tim Brown, Charlie Garner, Roland Williams. Oh, no, was it? He might have been in St. Louis. But anyways, he was okay. So, like, we're going back 18 years, but it's like, man, like, I'm not so sure we could win. Like I said, to only lose by 7, I felt the same way that I felt with the Rams getting it before. It's like, oh, okay, like, we still hung in there with them. Like, I feel like if we get them at home this time, we'll get them again. So, but like I said, I felt like that was the last game we were going to lose. They did catch fire for a second, but then I said it kind of got put out towards the end. But I thought we were going to go on. I still thought the run was coming. I was still confident.
I mean, you're not wrong, Ray, because after that loss, the Patriots then go on to win 3 in a row. They beat the Vikings 24-17, the Lions 20-12, and Drew Bledsoe and the Buffalo Bills 27-17. So again, right, this is that whirlwind of 2002. People want to say that this wasn't a relevant year. It's pretty relevant because it gave us – we literally saw the 2000 Patriots and the 2001 Patriots all in the same season, right? Now they're 8-5. They just beat another division team. The Lions were obviously they're not good. The Vikings were good, right? They still were pretty good that year. And now you're sitting it back and you're okay. There's 3 games left of the season. You're 8-5. You have been here before, to your point, right? Now all you need to do is do what Bill Belichick and Tom Brady would go on to do for the next 18 years and not lose in November or December, right? So now you're feeling good again. Well, this is a manic season. You're 8-5 now, Ray. So are you focused less on the Celtics and more on the Patriots again?
Yeah, I'm definitely back to New England at this time. I mean, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, now I can breathe again, so to speak. I can watch them come back. And then, we lose to Tennessee. And it's just like, I feel like
not only lose, like
20 it was 24-7.
We got our asses whooped by Steve McNair and the Titans.
Right. So they only score in the third quarter. So that's the only points they got in the game. And and I mean, hindsight's 2020, but it's like, I think some of us forget how good that Tennessee team was. So, Javon the Freak Curse, Kevin Dyson, my guy Eddie George. I had one of his jerseys growing up. Like, that guy was a beast coming out of Ohio State. So, Steve McNair, Frank the Tank Wycheck, so they had a really good team. And that team went to the Super Bowl. That team went to the AFC Championship game against us, if I'm not mistaken. So McNair ended up being co-MVP, not that year, but he ended up becoming an MVP. So, it was disappointing to see that after going on a winning streak, where maybe if you just had to win 1 or 2 more games after that, you're shooing for the playoffs, because the AFC East had been what it's always been under New England and Tom Brady's reign at that time, was subpar. So, but it was unfortunate to see that it ended like that.
Yeah, I mean, beat Tennessee or New York, and you're in the playoffs, right? You win the AFC East, because the Jets went on to win the East at 9-7. Had you beaten Tennessee, you would have been 10-6, and it would have been a different story. And it's interesting. We look at this season, and I look at it through 2 lenses. I look at it, one through the lens of the 13, 14-year-old kid that I was, looking at it going, oh man, like, these guys won the Super Bowl last year. Like, what's going on? And then I look at it from my 32-year-old self now and go, all right, you won the Super Bowl with a rookie quarterback, with a pretty veteran team at a lot of positions. And then you go into the next year and you finish 9-7, but you've beaten Pittsburgh, you've beaten Kansas City, you split the season with the Jets, who, again, I mean, they won the division, so they weren't a bad football team at the time. You sweep the Bills with Drew Bledsoe there, and like Ray said, I mean, that probably wasn't expected. So as myself now, I look back at this season. I maybe not in the last 10 years. But in the first 10 years, if I were 32 back in 2002 looking at this season, I'd be like, oh, yeah, that's pretty good. That's not bad. It could have been worse. But again, one thing goes a different way, and they're in the playoffs again. And looking back at this team, like Mike said, the defense was okay. I mean, they gave up 417 yards in a 24-17 win against Minnesota.
Yeah, but that to be fair, that Minnesota offense was phenomenal.
I understand, but I mean, like they were. Mike said it earlier that they were giving up a lot of after those first couple games of the season where they only gave up 283 and 200 to the Steelers and Jets respectively. I mean, they gave up except for one other game, they gave up over 300 yards in every single game,
and 140 of those yards were rushing.
Yeah, and 140 of those yards were rushing. And towards the end of the season, they were giving up 350 plus, except for one game, and that was against the Bears, which they won 33-30. So, I mean, the defense was deteriorating. One game goes a different way. I mean, they probably don't win the Super Bowl again. But again, revisionist history. Wow, this season was actually better than it looked on the surface when we started this conversation.
So now you're home at Gillette, right? It's snowy. You're playing the Dolphins. You're down 24-13 after the third quarter. And so in my mind, I'm like, no way. Like this would be totally a Boston sports team, like to really choke at the end. But actually I was wrong. What they would go on to do is Tom Brady would lead another fourth quarter comeback to set up a game-winning field goal by Adam Vinatieri in the snow at Gillette. The Patriots beat the Dolphins. They go to 9-7, but then Green Bay just lays a freaking goose egg, just an egg on the field, and they lose to the Jets 42-17, and the Patriots out of the playoffs. So again, for those of you listening at home, you may not believe us. This is what we were used to. Almost getting there, doing everything in your power to get there, and then something happens at the end, and guess what? You're not going to the playoffs. You're going home.
Well, the Packers had already locked up the NFC North, right? So at that point, they were like, you know, this was kind of another start of something new at that point in time. I don't remember it too much before this, but when a lot of teams would rest their dudes in week 17. So I don't think Favre played in that game. I don't think Terry Glenn played in that game.
Well, Glenn may have that. I don't know if he was a bona fide star in Green Bay. As from what I remember,
he's only there for that 1 year.
Yeah, he wasn't that great. He should have been great, but then he kind of he suffered around and then wound up in Dallas again in a couple of years. But Glenn was never the same as he was like on like the 1997 Patriots.
Brett Favre actually did play in that game. He went 16 of 33 for 172. And you know who was his backup that year? Doug Peterson, the current head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. Interesting. He went 6 of 8 for 43 yards and a touchdown in that game with a quarterback rating of 126.6, probably the best game of his career. But yeah, so I mean, they still played their guys. So forget what I said. Let's go back to what you said, Mike. I mean, the Packers just laid down in front of the Jets. I mean, they had won their division already, so they said, Mike Sherman and his guys, we're good.
It was just such a weird moment, Ray, right? Because Brady brings us back. The field goal is good. I remember, like, I was at my grandmother's house again, like celebrating, like, yes, they won. And then I realized I'm celebrating a team that isn't going to make the playoffs. Like, what were your emotions like, Rayshawn, when you watched that game and then later found out that you've been eliminated from the playoffs? Yeah,
so I mean, obviously, you have that feeling. You're hyped. You're like, let's go. Just give us a shot. Just get there. Get to the dance. To use a March Madness reference, just get to the dance. Let's just see what we can do, right? Obviously, I feel like they were going to be a wild card team because being 9-7, you weren't going to get a bye. But I just felt, okay, great. Like, you get there, just figure it out once you get there. And then obviously seeing that Green Bay had won, it was like, wow. Because I say, to this day, man, like the fact that New York Jets won that division that year still has me in shock. Chad freaking Pennington. I'll say it one more time. Chad freaking Pennington.
Hey,
it's
who
like,
was
wow.
better, Chad Pennington or Mark Sanchez?
No, yeah. I mean, well, yeah. I actually no. I'll take that back. No, Chad Pennington actually was better than Mark Sanchez. I think if you put Pennington on those teams later on that decade that went to the conference championship, they get to the Super Bowl one of those 2 times with Chad Pennington. Because that defense.
I agree with that.
But it was crazy to me because I'm like, they weren't world beaters on offense. I mean, what you got, Lavernius Coles, Santana Moss was okay. What was Curtis Martin still there at that time? So okay, so Curtis Martin still okay, great. But it's like, I don't know if Wayne Corbett was on the team or not, but it's like they weren't the same team that went to the AFC Championship game 4 years before they lost to Denver. So it was kind of shocking to me that they won. But I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, you have to, do your job, and we didn't do our job when it mattered most of that season, which is why we were on the outside looking in.
Not to make this the Jets hour but looking at that roster, that's a pretty good team to go 9-7. I mean, Curtis Martin ran for 1,094 yards and 7 touchdowns. Wayne Corbett had 51 catches for 691 yards and 9 touchdowns that season. So kind of a bit of a surprise. I mean, they had Lavernius Cole, Santana Moss, Curtis Martin, Lamont Jordan.
Is that the team that beat Is that the team that beat the Colts like 41 to like? Now, is that the same team
in that season?
Yeah, either that season or
it was 41-0 in the playoffs. That's right.
Playoffs, yeah.
It was a wild card round.
Yeah, I mean, and oh god, then I was like, oh, like maybe I was like, they deserve to be here. I was like, damn, I was like 41-0 to Peyton Manning. I said, oh Lord, I said that's woof. You play to win the game.
Peyton Manning's what probably my favorite of all time. I really like Peyton Manning. But looking back on him, like that was the kind of guy he was in the playoffs a lot of the time until that 2006 season. But again, not to make it about the Colts or the Jets, but this is what's so much fun about this and the rewrap, Mike, is looking back at these teams and looking at this Jets team. They should have been so much better than 9-7. They should have beat the Patriots twice. Like the Patriots should have been 8-8. And been packing it up, and but then it's so great looking back at these games, kind of our heyday as young fans, and seeing these names, and I mean this Jets team that was so good, Pittsburgh, Oakland, and you look back and say, wow, man, did we belong there? And at the time, the answer was probably no. I mean, you look at our roster, and Ray said it earlier, and I did too. I mean, I wasn't excited about I just really sounded like Stephen A. Smith. I got to channel that, bring that back. I wasn't excited about the draft, but looking at these rosters and looking at these, that 30-14 win and 44-7 win against the Jets and Steelers to open up that season. I mean, that was when they were still feeling it. And then it started to wear off in that Kansas City game, not to go back and recap the season again, but that's where it started to wear off, that 41-38 against Kansas City. And then it slowed down. And then, like Ray said, you get to the Bears game and it's like, all right, we're going to pick this back up. And then an Oakland team that really, I mean, lost by 7, but probably could have argued that they should have run all over us. And then we beat Minnesota, yes, was very good offensively, as Ray said, but then you roll over a Lions team that wasn't great. And I mean, I don't think the Patriots belonged necessarily in the Super Bowl. Squeaking into the playoffs may have been a different conversation, though.
Now we've come to the conclusion that the Patriots, they finished that season 9-7. They did not make the playoffs. They ranked 10th in the league on offense, 17th in the league on defense, which is just, it's mind-boggling when you think about everyone that was on that defense, right? You still had Ty Law, you still had Lawyer Malloy, you still had Richard Seymour, Teddy Bruschi, Ted Johnson, Mike Vrabel. I mean, everyone that held the glue together in 2001.
Richard Seymour.
Yeah, you also in this season, right? There were so many moments when you rallied behind them. They got into dogfights and they came out the other side victorious. They came back from being down 24-13. But at the end, you're left thinking, okay, maybe they are a 9-7 team. Maybe the 11-5 thing last year was a fluke because, as we're heading into the sunset of this, after the season, Bill Belichick is 28-23, including the playoffs, as a head coach of the Patriots. That's mediocre.
What's interesting about looking back at that time, right? Like, to look at this defense, look at the names that are on it. On paper, this team should have been better than 9-7 with that defense. The offense was young, but that defense was veteran. And that maybe they should have been better. I still look at these other teams in the division and in the conference and say, wow, man, like those teams were really good. And to have beaten a few of them is good. But I look back at it and say that 28-23 for Belichick to this point in his career as the New England Patriots coach, we'll take it, because in years past, prior to Parcells, which was less than 10 years before this point in time, because Parcells was a Kraft hire, and Kraft didn't buy the team until 1994. So 28-23, mediocre by today's standards. But we all know that I'm the one that's like, who's the next guy to go? Who's the next coach to go? At that point, there would be no reason. He's 28-23, and he has a Super Bowl in 3 seasons. And generally, I feel like you got to give, especially an NFL head coach, a lot of times, unless the locker room atmosphere is really bad, a la Bill O'Brien in Houston, you got to give a head coach at least 3 years. And Belichick was 5 games over 500 with a Super Bowl victory.
So Ray, right? 3 seasons in, you go 5-11 year one, miss the playoffs. Obviously, we know what happened in 2001, 11-5, they win the Super Bowl, right? Now you're 9-7, miss the playoffs again. What do you think about Bill Belichick? What do you think about the new Patriots regime, after the 2002 season?
Yeah, I have to say, like, at the end of the season, I felt like 2001 was a fluke. As we mentioned earlier in the show, like, Boston for so long had been a team that almost got it done. And yes, we got it done in 2001, but to have that sustained level of greatness just felt so surreal and just so out of reach, right? Now later on, subsequently, we find out that does happen. But at that moment, it's just like, man, like, okay, I can't keep going up and down with this roller coaster. But, hindsight's 2020, in the same breath, to go 5-11 your first year, to flip that around and go 11-5 the next year, and then you go 9-7, now I could look at it as someone who's 30 and say, okay, they was on the upward trend. But even then, I felt like, man, this is kind of inconsistent. I wouldn't have been shocked if he had got let go. But then I also felt like this team is not going to they're not going to sustain that level unless some guys that were just drafted, take it up a notch and man the day ever. So,
but we finally had back-to-back winning seasons, right? I mean, I don't think you can look at Belichick after the 2002 season and call for his job. And not that that's necessarily what either one of you were doing, but I think we talked about it when we did the rewrap of the 2001 season, where people were calling for his job after 2000, which was probably warranted. And I think that was also because we had seen an unceremonious split of the Patriots with Parcells. Pete Carroll came in, and we all know he's a different dude, but he gets things done in Seattle. He got things done at USC after he left here. And then Belichick comes in, and he's unproven. Nobody knows what he's going to do. He really didn't have much respect of this fan base, not to mention other teams. So after 2000 would have been the year to go. But now you're telling me that the New England Patriots, after decades of just floundering and flopping around and not being able to put anything. I mean, we had some really good players here in the years before Parcells or since before Kraft bought the team and Parcells came in as the head coach. But I mean, we had something to build off of now. Like, we had something exciting to look at, like even 9-7 for this town at that time. Now it would be unthinkable, right? I mean, what happens if this 2020 team goes 9-7? I mean, everybody's going to just attribute it to 2020, but it's what I've been saying for years since Brady got a little bit older. But back then, damn, I'm a second-year quarterback, a young tight end, 2 young receivers, and a lot of promise with a very good veteran defense that, I had some injuries and fell off towards the back end of that season in 2002. But no, man, we got so much to look forward to. 9-7. I've said it like 5 times already, but 9-7 back-to-back winning seasons after a crappy 2000 season and a Super Bowl ring. Belichick wasn't going anywhere. And I didn't want him to. And I just now as a 30-year-old, I look back at it and say, some of these teams are pretty good, and we probably didn't deserve to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, so like my dad and my uncle were huge Patriot fans, right? So they told me like there was 1 year in every decade that the Patriots showed up. There was 76, 85, 1996, and I was like, okay, well maybe 2001 they showed up and they won it. So we'll just our high got a little higher this time. Maybe we'll just have to wait another 10 years. And after 2002, I'm thinking, again, like a Boston sports fan, well, at least we did it. At least they did it once. Like I saw them do it. It's great. But this is going to be towards the segue for the 2003 championship rerep. But little did we know that this season could actually be pointed to as where the greatness was really cemented. The things that happened in this year led them to an offseason that we will talk about in future episodes that defined the Patriots in 2003 and 2004. So guys, like any parting words for the 2002 New England Patriots?
A disappointing season as a kid who had just watched your team win a Super Bowl. I think as a teenager who grew up watching this team lose all the time, and this was just exciting. Had been at the Super Bowl and you're like, it's going to happen all the time. But then you kind of have your expectations tempered by the guy you go to games with every week. And he's like, hey man, I've been doing this for 42 years. Like, don't get used to this because this may not happen. Well, I know that, Ray's mom said the same thing. And we probably heard it from, again, an uncle, a father, a grandfather of, hey, this is Boston. But this is also where we became Boston, or at least started to, and we started playing that underdog role and rolled with it, and it's paid off.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I had that moment of disappointment too. Like I said, I felt that 01 was a fluke afterwards, but luckily it didn't stay there. It didn't stay in mediocrity, so to speak. Like 28 and 23 was the lowest it ever was going to look for Bill. And it was, thankfully Robert Kraft and the rest of the ownership trusted in what Bill was building. He trusted what Pioli was doing, and just what the coaching staff overall wanted to do for their vision. So I'm glad that it didn't stop there, and I'm thankful that players on that team contributed to winning going forward. So you can't have the greatness without the lumps. So, we'll just leave it at that.
I forgot Scott Pioli was the GM of that team. I really liked Scott Pioli. I think Bill did too. And it was time for him to move on when he did a few years after this. But man, he was so good at putting these teams together and keeping them together.
Absolutely. So guys, thank you so much for joining me here tonight. Thank you all for listening. That will do it for this edition of the Championship Hangover. For Rayshawn, Buchanan, Joe Malkin, my name is Michael Marcangelo. Stay tuned for the next Championship Hangover when we discuss the 2005 Boston Red Sox. But until then, we'll talk to you guys later.
Welcome to the Reverie channel, where entertainment knows no bounds. Live concerts, on-demand music, documentaries, and short films, all in stunning HD. Now on Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Immerse yourself from home. And on Android and iOS for those on the move. Support creators with crowdfunding donations. Fuel their creativity. Join us in shaping entertainment's future. The Reverie Channel, where every view, every donation matters.
Welcome to Ringside with Ray and Prince. My name is Ray Leonard Jr.
Oh, is that the set? No, that's just my dad.
My name is Prince Daniels Jr.
Daniels again with a big home touchdown.
On this show, we come to humanize
Athletes, entertainers, business executives. We're going to see what makes them tick.
Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific time on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll see you there. Peace and power.
Electric acid. Electric acid.